Joining us from Seattle is someone who knows a lot about this and in some cases how to solve it. Darren actually spoke at Mainstream in Melbourne 2 years ago, did a couple of amazing presentations. He's the head of leadership and talent development at Amazon and has worked with before Amazon with Microsoft and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And even in Amazon himself, a lot of people wouldn't know that it operates one of the world's largest asset-intensive networks as well, with massive fulfillment centers, transport fleets, complex logistics operations as well. So today, Darren is sharing, I guess, the playbook he knows so well. So please join me in welcoming Darren back to Mainstream. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and great to be here. I wish I was in Australia though, because you guys treated me fabulously a couple years ago. But I'm in Seattle, and it's summertime up in Seattle, so we're getting some pretty nice and nice weather here. So can't complain too much. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll go right into it. Yeah, so we're going to talk today about maintenance workforces. So in your case, a lot of you are dealing with maintenance and your workforce is aging, or there's a lot of competition for the type of work that is being done all over the world. And so we're going to talk about what I call, here's how to keep the genius, right? So how to keep people's knowledge in our organizations. And so there's some what I call knowledge retention strategies for a changing workforce. And so I don't think that this is gonna, the workforce is, people are saying, oh, boomers are retiring, and what are we gonna do, once they all retire? But honestly, I think the workforce is just changing a lot. And so we've seen this in Amazon. We've seen that, yes, we've got some younger, people coming in, but the workforce itself globally is changing in a way that, because of automation, because of AI, and some of those things, we may see less people in the workforce. We may see people in the different sectors and industries. And so I think people are shifting around. And so we're seeing a lot of that in Amazon as well. And so again, I don't think it's just going to stop when all the boomers retire. I think we're going to have this challenge, over the next few years. And again, people are changing roles and moving to different companies on a short-term basis. Many of you probably have worked in your industry for a long time. I know I've been in the learning and development industry for close to 30 years, different companies, but it's been my core job for many years. My father owned a plastic fabrication company, and he was in that industry for 40 years. But that doesn't happen anymore. There's lots of people moving from industry to industry and taking a lot of those skills and their knowledge with them to move into other industries. So we're going to talk a little bit about those things today and how it applies to your industries that you're working with. So I work in Seattle. I am a senior global leadership and talent development manager. So I work across Amazon, and so I work a lot with teams all over the world. So I've been to a few different places in Australia. So Sydney, Melbourne, and a few other places. I travel a lot to China and to Europe and stuff. So I get to see a lot of the warehouses that we have in the different places. Get to see a lot of where we look at logistics. So if we're delivering packages all over the world. So I get to kind of span a lot of the different industries that Amazon is a part of. And so really interested in talking with my executives about what they're thinking, how we're trying to move the needle on keeping knowledge inside the organization. And for us, it was similar. Is that we would have principal engineers, for example. So people are highly technical, but they would move to Facebook or they would move to Microsoft, and that just happens. And so again, we started a couple years ago of really putting some of these things into action more so than we had before, because before we just hire new people, and there's not always that luxury to hire new people. And so as we kind of go through this, I think we're going through what I would call a knowledge loss crisis, and that's where we're seeing, experienced employees retiring. They're taking those critical knowledge, the things that are in their head that they've been doing the work that they're doing for years, and we're just losing it. There's nothing written out. It's all, again, all in their head. And I call it the operational genius. It's the people that really are running organizations, right? It's the people in the field. It's the people that are running that same machine for 15 years, or they're the ones that really understand. In my case, there's a lot of logistics that we're seeing. And when someone leaves, let's say, a logistics center, that's a small logistics center, let's say, and this just happened recently in Luxembourg, and we were like, oh crap, what do we do? There's just a lot of like tribal knowledge that leaves. And so again, it's really about that kind of knowledge that leaves. And so I know that in Australia too, you're facing a projected shortage. So about 25,000 maintenance and reliability professionals by 2027. So there's a lot happening there. The interesting thing, by the way, is I do a lot around skills development in Amazon, and I speak a lot to other organizations about skills development. The interesting thing about some of these industries, if you think about maintenance and manufacturing and stuff like that, in a lot of countries, those are really great jobs and secure jobs. So interesting to see that there are some countries that's declining. If you look at South Africa, those kinds of jobs are actually on the uptake, and so yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about those things. One thing I did forget to mention is for me, I have a little bit of a neurological, well, not a little bit, I have a neurological disease that sometimes makes me twitch and stutter a little bit. So hopefully that won't distract you too much. But if you do see me twitch or stutter, it's okay. I'm on medication. So yeah, and so let's dig in a little bit more though. So we're losing more than just the people, right? So here's what studies have shown. 50% of your org's knowledge goes out the door with each department. So if you think about, and it's not 50% of the whole org, right? But the know-how that person has, the know-how that people have doesn't just automatically get translated to someone else, right? Again, they're the doers. They're the ones in the trenches. They're the ones screwing the bolt on. They're the ones fixing the valves and stuff like that. That tacit knowledge doesn't live anywhere on your internet. And so when people go, oh, go look at the internet for these things, it's not there. It lives again in people's heads. And so what we really need to do is figure out how do we retain that intelligence within our organization, and how do we do that in a really meaningful way that will help people grow, that people want to share that information. So I'm going to talk about some of those things. And then this quiet quitting is really, we know that happens, but the quiet knowledge loss, I think, is more important to focus on. I shouldn't say more important to focus on. We don't want people to quit. We want people to be satisfied with their work. We want people to stay. But when they just quietly quit and they take that knowledge with you, and they don't even bother to tell us that hey, this thing happened, let's say, over the course of 2 months. Wouldn't it be great if you told someone instead of it's going to be a surprise for the next person, right? So there is a little bit of that AI and human interaction that we can use today, right? And so, but the thing about that is, and I know this firsthand because we've been working on this, is AI and humans aren't separate, or they shouldn't be separate systems. They should really be working together, and they can work hand in hand if we set up the systems right. And so that's, again, we're going to talk about, what happens when we're using AI. What are some of those things that we can do out in the field that helps people, put things back into a system. But really, what happens when knowledge walks out the door is there's a lot of risk involved there. So if you think about some of the risks, right? So you got downtime. So downtime means that, we've got lots of maybe errors and, repeated errors. It takes longer for systems come back online when we don't know why that happened. There's a lot of safety issues that can happen. So if we think about the regulatory challenges and opportunities that you have, in some of your industries, we have to have adherence. And so we are creating sometimes some serious liabilities for organizations if some of that safety and compliance, if that tacit knowledge around safety just leaves. And then a little bit more, deep into the kind of the asset management or the performance of our assets, right? So if we don't have that transfer of knowledge, the equipment reliability suffers. If we don't know, again, some of you might be in manufacturing, some of you might be in mining industries and stuff like that. I think we've seen this, right? If you're not keeping up on the maintenance, and by the way, I think we all know this today too. It's not everything is in the manual. And so if you look at your car, right? I go out, change the oil in my car. I'm looking at different things. I look at the manual. I'm like, well, that's not always in the manual of like what could keep this car running better, right? And so I've got a couple older cars, and so again, I'm looking at these manuals going, well, you know what? I need to grease the axles more than it says in the book because this car was from 1980 or that sort of thing. So again, we want to really minimize those risks that happen in our organizations. So as I go through, I'm going to share a couple of case studies that kind of show you what's happening in other industries. I do draw from Amazon, and I'll do some of those as well. And then I found a few examples from companies in Australia. So again, we'll go into some of those as well. One of them though is NASA. So NASA understood that 70% of their exiting employees were taking critical knowledge with them. So when they were starting to do exit interviews, so they would do exit interviews like many of us do, and they say, "Hey, why are you quitting the job? Why are you moving on? What could we have done better?" And then they started adjusting it, and they started adjusting in that they said, "Well, what are some of the critical skills that you think that the role that we have to fill now? So the role that you're in, that you're leaving, what are some of those critical skills that the next person might need?" And as they started documenting these exit interviews, they were finding that again, all these tasks that they didn't know about. It's a huge task analysis gap that they had no clue on a lot of these from a lot of these engineers. And there's a lot of skills that were applied that they didn't really understand. And so if you look at some of the skills and knowledge that were leaving NASA, that equaled to about a $72 million a year in productivity loss. And so, and again, that's just huge, right? And that was again because of layoffs, turnovers, and that sort of thing. So they started what they call a critical knowledge gateway. So the shuttle program was one example where the shuttle. So if you know anything about NASA, you know that the shuttle program been taking astronauts up into space, into the space station for a long time. And so they were really going through, and again, a lot of these scientists and engineers, they'd been on the shuttle program from the 1980s in some cases, and so they had long-term knowledge of this. And so they were kind of going through what they called these retirement waves. So people were starting to leave the organization. And again, as they started kind of thinking about this, they said, well, we need to really figure this out. So this critical knowledge gateway that they started was really not about documentation. It was really about how do we take this rich information that people have in their head and then translate that back into maybe a standard operating procedure, a way of documenting it. And so the funny thing about this is when you look at this and you look at this like, wow, NASA's just this big organization. They've got millions of dollars. And this critical knowledge gateway was simply, there was a couple of things that they did. One of them was they would videotape the exit interviews. They would ask and say, "Can we videotape this exit interview? And we're going to ask you kind of standard questions. If you don't want that on video, that's fine. But let us ask you about your job." And so they went through and started talking about their job. And so, and they would even sometimes give them bonuses. So for the critical roles, think about like a principal engineer that worked on rocket engines or some of the Mars rover and stuff like that. They would say, "We'll pay you a bonus of $500 to stay for a couple more hours and answer some questions about your job." And it was simply just doing a task analysis of their job that they hadn't done before. And so again, this critical knowledge gateway was just a series of videos that they started capturing. Then they would take those videos and they would use AI to transcribe them, and then they would download that and they would then have artificial intelligence to then categorize those and put those into different tasks and skill sets that they needed. And they became kind of the new job descriptions for people that they were hiring in for these roles. And I think many of us know that in our industries, in fact, if I asked you to put in the chat right now, how many of you on, when you got hired at your job, whether it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even 6 months ago, you look at your job, when you're applying for it and you do the interview and that sort of thing, and then you get hired. Day one, you start and you're like, okay, great. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. By the 30 days in, you're looking at if you look back at your job description at any time, you're like going, that's not really what I do on a daily basis. There's a few things around here, but job description is really pretty, they're filled with a lot of what I call fluff. And so NASA was really interested in this of like, oh, the things we're hiring for are not always what we're doing. And so not every single engineer does the same thing. Not every single role does the same task. And so they were actually then restructuring their job roles and the job descriptions based on these exit interviews. So again, it's this thing of like, people think, well, we're gonna have to spend hours documenting, what's being done and stuff like that. But again, this was done in the 1 or 2 hour exit interviews, and again, putting that into systems that would help kind of source the information, aggregate it, and put it into now again some kind of tactical job descriptions so they could hire for those different things and bring people in and say, here's the things you are exactly going to do. So really interesting that NASA kind of found again, one of a quick way of doing that in a short period of time. The thing that I think is really interesting, and I've heard this over and over again, like I said, I travel the world. I talk to people in many different roles. So I'll go to warehouses. I'll go on a, ride along with people that are taking, unloading airplanes and taking them on our big trucks. And I'll be sitting in warehouses with our people. I work with people in robotics, so we're looking at the robots that are working in the warehouses. I'll sit in the logistics center, and again, just fascinating stuff. But I came up with the thought of like, and I call him Carl, and I call him Carl the undocumented legend. And we all have this, right? So Carl, if you look on the slide, Carl's sitting there and he's like, and again, he's been there for years. He's moving on to something else. Maybe he's retiring, maybe he's moving on to something else. And the problem is that Carl leaves at 5 o'clock. He's gone. Next morning, 13 help desk tickets happen because there's a production outage, and then there's panic that happens. So AI could have helped with this if we had put some of this, standard operating procedures that Carl was doing, right? If we put them in a system. But really what we needed to do with Carl, we need Carl to have a mentee. Carl could have been a coach to or a mentor to someone inside that organization. And yet that didn't happen. And so I call this, I say, we let Carl leave without a handoff. That's an asset risk 101. That should be like textbook MBA. If you're going to let someone walk out the door that has even 5 years of experience in your organization, doing some specialty roles or things that only a handful of people do in your organization, that's a huge risk. But even if they're doing something that is not, that's more, that many people do, but this is a high performer, and Carl was a high performer. It's like, what did he do differently? And so, so you lose why he did it, how he did it, the manuals that you have, as I said before. If there's no context to it, you're just guessing about what happens and how to fix whatever it is that broke. And then other people, they hate recreating that, right? And help desk hates getting midnight calls. Now I share this story because this actually happened. There was, and his name wasn't Carl, but it was a person that was working in our logistics center. And I won't tell you what city. 13 help desk tickets happened because of a production outage. And again, we were down for too long, and so we lost thousands of dollars because one person walked out the door. Other people were saying, okay, now that you're getting these tickets, what do we do? They were searching the knowledge base. They were calling up, different people that worked with Carl, and they're saying, how did he do this? And they're like, I don't know. He was just so good that he would be able to come in, work on a particular machine and get it running. And sometimes people would shadow him, right? But they didn't know everything about it. So again, this is what happens. This happens a lot in these different industries, right? Especially when they're out in the field. And so in corporate, again, you think about like in corporate environments like Amazon, I'll go into corporate offices in Seattle, and there's a part of Seattle, and Amazon owns about 13 buildings. Well, not about, owns 13 buildings. And so you see hundreds of people in and out of these buildings, but they're doing that corporate work, right? So there's a lot of people like, oh, I'm going to go on the wiki, I'm going to check the internet for some of these things and stuff like that. But again, that's only a part of our workforce. If you think about Amazon as a corporation, we've got roughly about 150,000 people worldwide that work in a corporate role. And so that again spans from customer service to help desk to finance to people developing our products and services like AWS. But we worldwide, we have a 1.2 million person organization. So only 150,000 of them work in corporate, but the rest of them are working out in the field. And again, that means that they're in our different facilities. And so, so again, could be warehouses, could be driving, could be logistics. We now own it's called Whole Foods, which is a grocery store chain. So we own those. So it's just a lot of different roles again that aren't in the corporate environment. And so again, you know, when I look at Carl, I'm like, Carl, you know, Carl's carrying a clipboard around and that sort of thing. It's like he's not logging on to the systems very often. And so again, we got to get around some of that stuff. What is it we're going to do to help these people, you know, or help ourselves to keep that knowledge inside our organization? So here's a few things. So what I call it, so identify and capture the knowledge before it walks. And what I mean by that is if we should be having a early warning system. And if you think about it, it's not really that much different than, you know, an earthquake or you know, hurricane or something like that. When the weather changes, you know, there's early warning systems for a lot of these things, right? So in Seattle, we kind of sit on a fault line in the Pacific, out in the Pacific Ocean. There's a fault line that kind of runs near Seattle, and so there's little tremors that happen out there in the ocean. But once in a while, the plates will shift a little bit, and in Seattle we'll get a warning. It's like, oh, we might have an earthquake, or we have a mountain nearby. It's called Mount Rainier. It's actually an active volcano, and so we'll say, oh, there's some rumbling of the under the mountain, and so again, some little earthquakes. Could the mountain erupt? Could be. Could we get an earthquake that would cause a tsunami? It could happen, but there's early warning systems for that. And the question I always have, and I talk to again a lot of people internally. I say, why aren't we having an early warning system? If your top performer left tomorrow, how would you know that what you're doing today with that person is going to be the same tomorrow with another person? And the question I usually, or the answer I usually get back from people is, we don't know. And so what I ask leaders to do when we're in strategy sessions and we're talking about workforce management, and we're talking about you know, what do we need for today? What do we need for tomorrow? How are we going to upskill and reskill people? I talk about mapping critical roles. So what happens in these critical roles? Again, a lot of these critical roles that you have, they're the ones that have the most tenure. So we should know who those people are. If we know who those people are, then we should audit the knowledge. And so I'm like, it shouldn't fall in the black hole. And it's not just IT. It happens across all organizations, right? So the other thing that we do is so you can do this in different industries. So I put in here track retirement timelines plus, you know, voluntary exits, and what does that do for our capture plan, right? So we will, you know, potentially, you know, have people that will retire this year from Amazon. We'll have people that will move on to different organizations. We're like every other organization in the world right now that's reorging, and some people get laid off. But if we don't have a plan in place now to capture some of that information, you know, we're going to lose again a lot of that. So what I ask leaders to do is I ask them to think about those mission critical roles. How are you going to plan for it? You know, and again, if there are people in logistics that have been here for 10, 15 years that help build our logistics system, guaranteed that they're probably looking for retirement at some point. They're going to get poached from another company. And so we need to number one, identify it, don't let it slip away, and then figure out how are we going to do that. And the knowledge, you know, the knowledge exit interviews. So I'm starting to ask our our managers to do something similar to than what NASA was doing, right? Is let's do exit interviews like they did, and let's figure out how do we document some of this stuff. But honestly, I think that's the I don't really want to do that. What I really want to do is create in what I call create a I wish I knew knowledge series, right? And so internally we do some of this work, and the wish I knew, and I had talked about that a little bit of like what would I need to know? I wish I knew this if you left. And so we'll talk again a little bit about these things. But if you don't have this system in place, if you're not talking about that now, because workforce is changing, right? And again, it's not just people retiring; it's people leaving for other jobs and stuff like that. Got to have a plan in place for these things. So the other thing that I know, and again, this goes back to, and I talk to a lot of executives about this. Our smartest people aren't at desks. So I sit in Seattle. I go and I talk to executives. We sit in this, in this great, this great conference room. We got the table and coffee and all of that. We're all, there's 10 of us sitting around there, and the executives are saying, "Oh, how do we, let's roll this out as a system and that sort of thing." And usually I'm one of the first ones to raise my hand. I say, these these people, they don't have, they may not have access to our learning management system. They may not log onto a computer at all. They may have a phone. So everybody's got a mobile device, right? But a lot of them, that are out in the field, they don't log into a computer at all during the day. And so what do we do about that? So again, it's if you think about your knowledge base that you have internally. So if some of you are working at that corporate level, but then again, you have people that are out in the field, those traditional knowledge bases, those aren't always accessible to people out in the field. And so your standard operating procedures, sometimes they get typed up, they get printed out, but then that knowledge becomes outdated pretty quickly. So you need something that's a little bit more dynamic. Not only that, but a lot of what they're doing is physical. It's observable, but it's not always documented. And so if you think about the standard capture methods, like I said, it's like surveys or wikis and stuff like that. They don't translate to people that outside of HQ, right? There's the other problem here, and I think this is a big one, is if you look at this picture here, right? So there's a couple people that are sitting in a warehouse. They're doing a safety audit and that sort of thing. And I'd ask them and say, I would say, hey, if I came to you and I said, hey, I want you to share with me all the safety protocols you do, or all the things that you need to do to follow the safety protocols. They would roll their eyes. And I've asked this question of a few different people, but this is, like I said, this is one that I think is really interesting. Is they rolled their eyes and said, "Oh, okay, I got to walk through all these safety regulations that you should know because like corporate and finance and legal set these things up." But again, we're looking at the codes, right? We're like, here's a safety code for this and all that. Here's where OSHA might be, and OSHA is our United States regulation on safety in like manufacturing and stuff like that. But the funny thing is, there's no incentive for them to share. They're like, I do my job, and I get paid. I get paid okay, but they don't get paid the big bucks like people do at corporate, right? And so they're like, yeah, there's no incentive for me to share. It's like, yeah, I'm just doing my job. So that's the interesting thing, is like we don't give them incentives, and I think we could. And again, I've got a couple examples of how we could do how we might be able to do incentives. But here's the thing: do you have systems that they don't have access to? That means you're sidelining your experts. You're literally like blocking people from sharing that information if it has to be accessed from a computer. Even some of the tablets may not access some of your systems. So again, can you open those up on your mobile device and tablets? A lot of times you can. Have we done that? Sometimes we haven't. Again, a lot of people, like these people, there's a computer sitting in front of that guy, but it was so funny because he was typing and he was a 2-finger typer, and he's like, I don't use a computer on a daily basis. For the audit they do, it's a quarterly audit, but he doesn't do that on a daily basis. So so the other thing that I think is interesting, so if you look at, there's another case study for you, is it's kind of what I call explicit versus tacit. So documenting what's invisible. And so this is another great story from Rolls-Royce. Is it's tacit is it's felt, right? Again, it's something that just can't be captured. And Rolls-Royce, everyone knows about Rolls-Royce, right? Is that Rolls-Royce makes their cars one at a time, and they have specialists that work on the engine, then they have specialists that work on the body and stuff like that, and they just know it. They know that car inside and out from what they're doing. Like if you're working on the engine, you know that engine inside and out. So again, it's almost like a feeling you have. So if you have a hobby, let's say you go fishing, or let's say you do photography or something like that, you know it because you've been doing it for such a long time. It's like I used to years ago, I went to school for photography in college, right? And I just know it. I know how to frame a shot. I know what the shutter speed should be and f-stops and stuff like that because it just becomes second nature to me. Now, can I just explain that to someone in 30 seconds? Not really. But can we talk about it through shadowing, through having dialogues and stuff like that? Absolutely. And so if you think about this, so what Rolls-Royce did is they brought in video and they did what they call expert interviews to capture some of that knowledge. And so and I love the way they started this is they would sit down and they would have these people that they worked in Rolls-Royce, but they weren't sitting in an office. They would take some of the people from the floor. So they would take a manager or a high performer, and they actually sent them and said, "We need you to be an interviewer or like a reporter. We need you to get trained on how to interview other people on how to do this work." And so the funny thing is that they went and got trained. So think about a reporter, and they come back in, and you're sitting there with one of your peers that you've been working side by side with for, let's say, 10 years, and you're asking them questions about their work. And it felt weird at first, apparently. And I could see this too. It kind of feel a little weird. It's like, oh, you're asking me, but you're working beside me, or you're working over there. You know what I do. But as you started talking about, as they started talking about, and again, they were videotaping this, working on an engine or something, they'd say, well, if you put the engine in this way and it's slightly turned, it won't fit, the bolts won't fit here. But if you have, just a couple degrees like this, set it down and then move it, then you can all the bolts fit. And it was just simple things like that, where you have it on videotape, right? So every SOP that they have now says in there, it says, here's what the manual says, here's what you really do. Here's what you really do to get this engine to sit right. And so the funny thing, I think it's funny that they did that, but also it's we see this all the time, right? I remember growing up, my dad would, we would be chopping wood or something like that, and he'd say, "Oh, you're chopping wood wrong. Here's what we need to do here, or here's how you should do it." Right? So it's the same concept. It's like, and I look at it and go, "Oh, he chopped the wood like this. If it's too big of a log, that sort of thing." And so again, it was learning from him. And again, same thing here is people learn by watching, not by reading. In fact, a lot of the manuals that we have, and again, if I asked you to put this in the chat, I guarantee you that at least half of you would say, "Yeah, I got that big binder that sat on my shelf. You put it, you got it first day, you flipped through it a few times, you read the first few things, and you put it on your shelf because Bob over here or Jane over here was the one that you knew you could go to get anything you needed around whatever it is you were working on." And we spent thousands of dollars over the years. When I was at FedEx, for example, I was at FedEx for almost 8 years, and we'd spend thousands of dollars on these manuals and these thick manuals, 3-inch manuals, just to do certain jobs, right? And I saw this time and time again. And by the way, this is back in the 90s and early 2000s. So what I started doing was, instead of creating manuals for things, I was videotaping. I would go on the road with a back then it was harder for us to, we didn't have, like right now, it's like I can carry my cell phone and do a video, and I can capture a lot of these things that they're doing at like Rolls-Royce, right? But back then I actually had to hire a video crew and stuff like that, had to have them edit, and then we were shipping out VHS tapes to different locations. But here's the thing, people loved it because they could sit and watch a videotape and they go, "Oh, this is how you do that thing." And then it started to move into DVDs, and then moved on to online and internet and stuff like that. So now it gets even easier to do it. The other thing about this that I think is really fascinating is it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have like Hollywood lighting and stuff like that. It doesn't have to have Hollywood editing. It just needs to show what needs to get done. And so again, I think sometimes, sometimes we tend to want to polish things up, and really what people want is just, it's like, how do I get that thing done? So again, kind of a joke here, but in Amazon, we talk about this all the time. It's like, hey, just ask the wiki. It's like, oh man, no one's no one says that anymore. So the chat, and I'll be completely transparent. So AI has helped us on our wiki. So our intranet is based on a wiki platform. Now, a lot of organizations have either homegrown system, maybe they're using SharePoint, maybe they're using Wiki. But I love this because I heard this from a tech person a couple years ago, and they said if your knowledge base is older than your intern, it's dead, which is so true, right? But yet a lot of our knowledge bases are there. In Amazon, finding stuff on a wiki less than 2 years ago was really hard because in order to make a intranet work, you have to tag documents, you have to tag content and stuff like that, and people wouldn't do it. People, that was too much work for them. They'd create this really great document where they say, "Oh, this I uploaded it to Wiki," and then you've got again with 150,000 people, how are you going to find that stuff on the Wiki? Well, you'd go do a search, but search wasn't good because nothing was tagged. And so again, the way I think about this is don't build digital file cabinets, but you can use AI now if you've got a large repository of content and information, you can have AI really help with that. But again, the tech helps, but it's not just search. So again, I think that those things are great for certain things, and AI is going to help you with that. But how do we share information right outside of that? And so I've got a couple of examples from Amazon that I want to share with you. So if you think about our Amazon robotics program, some of the things that the engineers do is what they call so they do use a wiki for this. Now within the robotics program, they know where their stuff is on a wiki, right? So they do a really good job of that. And they do what they call a short form COE. And COE just stands for correction of errors. So in the robotics program, whether it's something we're doing for Amazon Air, so we're working on drones to deliver packages, or whether it's robotics in our warehouses, if something happens and there's let's say that there's a outage or something like that, we do what we call a correction of errors. So we actually go through and do a root cause analysis. We look at the problem, look at the solutions, and we do a correction of errors. That gets put up on the wiki, and it's updated as that problem gets solved. So everybody knows where to go to see, oh, if this particular robot within the warehouses that are delivering blah blah blah, whatever it happens to be. Let's say it's just a robot in a warehouse. We know where to go to find that information, and it's always up to date because it's a standard operating procedure, and it's a one page. It's what we call a one pager. We write very concisely at Amazon, and so anything that happens in robotics that has a correction error, it's a one page. And so it's not 5 pages, it's not 20 pages. We want to say, here's the problem, here's how we fixed it. If there's more information you need, you can go here. But we need it to be concise, so we go, oh, okay, this is how we fixed it. If there's another problem that comes out of it, it's going to be linked to that one. The other things that I think are just really easy is, again, we're using videos, right? So we do videos and we talk to people in the warehouses, and we talk to them about how they're using how they're maintaining some of these systems and stuff like that. We do what is called a lunch and learn, and we record all those things. So the thing about people that a lot of people, I don't think we understand that people really do like to get recognized. Now, there are some people that, they say, hey, I've done my job. I just want to go home at 5 o'clock. But honestly, there's a lot of people that are really good at their job. And we say, we'd love to just talk to you, have a lunch and learn. Talk for 30 minutes about the thing that you developed. Or you're really good at your job, and there's this really interesting thing around logistics on how you, and this true story is that so this about a year ago, we were trying to have AI help us with logistics on routing. and it's so funny because you have Google and Apple Maps and stuff like that that route you and they tell you when traffic's going to happen and stuff like that. But it's so interesting that we had a person that we actually had people come from the field and work with the team. So the team team of engineers that were doing the coding, they were working with the AI, and it's so funny because they would say things like, "Well, if in this part of Seattle, or this, in fact, there's another one in this part of Memphis, that if it rains that day, this whole road is just slicker." This is what they said: "They're slicker than snot." And he said, so we don't go that path because it actually slows us down because we have to like really, because it was a road that throughout summertime, you get all the oil and grease from the cars and trucks and stuff like that. So when they get the first rains in the fall, it would just be really slick. And they'd say, oh, in that time of year, we actually avoid that. And we actually save time by going a different route because we had to slow down too much. And so things like that were, so we put them on a lunch and learn and we said, hey, that's so great. Let's put you out there and video record it. So now it's part of our logistics, it's part of our AI, is building those things in of making sure that what you're seeing in person is part of our process. And then last thing I'll share on this one is we do what we call internal hackathons. And it's really about what are new ideas. So if you think that a problem can be improved, we do this across Amazon. We do it in warehouses. We do it in our logistics. We do it in our Whole Foods. Is what could we do to make this process better? And so we do incentives for that. So if you come up with, if you're in the top three, and we choose your idea, similar to some other companies like Google, where it's like we give you time to work on it. So we're going to give you a time. We might give you a team to work on it to try it out. And so those kinds of things I think are really great to really kind of, again, have that expertise work on it. And again, the funny thing about this is, yeah, there usually is a corporate, or an executive sponsor, and there's probably a program manager or technical program manager. But we bring in people from the field that will help us with this because again, they're the ones that are seeing it. They're seeing it firsthand. Another one that we do is in the warehouses. So we do daily stand-up or Gemba walks, right? So we highlight managers in most of our warehouses are required to walk the floor, and they'll take people with them. And so managers walk the floor. They do what they call that Gemba walk, right? So they actually walk the floor. And if you're a new employee, they point out, here's what this person's doing. This is why they're doing it this way. Point out safety procedures and stuff like that. So all those things are done on a daily basis. And so they'll pull one person off the floor, do a Gemba walk with them. Then the next day they'll pull someone else. So imagine a manager who manages, let's say, 15 people on their team. Over the course of a couple of weeks, all of them have done the Gemba walk. And so again, what happens is they'll see things that, oh, that's an interesting thing. We didn't see that before. Maybe that shelf up there could be, could be filled with something, or maybe it's a safety hazard and stuff like that. So all those things are done peer to peer. So again, or in this case, peer to manager. We do a lot of video capture. We do a lot of what I call visual SOPs. So we take pictures, we post them on the workstations throughout the warehouse. We do a lot of peer mentoring. And so we pair them with new hires. We spend a little bit of time on that to make sure that people really understand their job. And so we don't want people just to sit down with a manual or even a video necessarily. I mean, if the video is more than 10 minutes long, people would get bored anyways. And they're going to start looking at other things. They're not going to pay attention to video. So again, we want to pair them with people if we can, because honestly, especially with certain kinds of work where we know that it takes skill to run a machine or it takes some skill to do it, it's actually worth the cost to do that with them. Is to have a peer walk around with them, show them the ropes, so to speak, rather than trying to, now we don't always have the manager do it. We have again, it could be someone that has only been in the role for 6 months, but they're really good at it already. And so they're like, hey, focus on this one, George, and you teach Sheila to develop, to do this thing, right? So again, they love it because even though they're new to the job, they're really good at it. They can teach someone else. Then we take all of that, regardless of whether it's a video, we take feedback from the peer mentors. So we ask them to just fill out a brief survey on their phone about the peer mentor, what they learned and stuff like that. Then we feed it into AI and we analyze those for productivity. So then we look at those things, and again, what we see is we see some of those hacks. We're like, oh, that really works, and it works over and over again. So we try it in somewhere else, and it works great. Now let's roll it out, across different stores or across different warehouses. So we do a lot of that kind of work. A lot of people think of Amazon's like, oh, it's all just, it's all it's all AI run and stuff like that. It really is a lot of about the people and how they're doing the work. So again, I think that these kinds of things are just really, these are the kinds of things that we should be doing more of. This is another one. So many of you know that Toyota created what they call Kaizen circles, where frontline workers, they own that process improvement. They own the knowledge sharing across there. And so they, in Toyota, and there's a lot of companies that have done this, since Toyota created the lean manufacturing, started the Kaizen kind of model and stuff like that, is they have what they call knowledge captains. So these are the people that they bridge the team and the tech, right? What I mean by that is similar to what we saw before is they'll walk around with mobile phones and they'll talk to people, and if they see something different, they've got some applications that you can have on your mobile phone, and they basically, it's a manuscript, right? So they'll dictate what they're seeing in this particular part of the manufacturing. So they'll call it up. They're saying, hey, I'm at the let's say that they're rolling out an EV or something like that. Maybe it's at the battery installation session or place. And so they'll actually say, okay, so there's different apps, or within the app, they can point to the different places that on the manufacturing line, and they say, this is what's happening, this is what I see here, and so is the one that told me that we might be able to improve this process if we do this, or they're seeing something that's different today than it was, for the last few weeks. And so what happens is that gets recorded. The AI then parses that, and if we see a lot of if they see a lot of those, they can then start to look at them and say, oh, here's maybe how we fix this. But they reward their employees for doing that as well, which I think is just fantastic. So so the knowledge captains, again, aren't managers. They're the people that are doing the job. And it's really, it's a reward for them to be a knowledge captain, because they get in this case, a couple of people that I talked to at Toyota, they get time off. They get 1 or 2 days off, for being a knowledge captain for a month, which is great, right? And then the people that are helping them, right, that see something that needs process improvement, they're saying, oh, we can help with this, and then they get a bonus, And again, sometimes it's a gift card of like $25 or something like that, but the recognition is what people really like too. So if you think about this, this is what I say this is, I'm like, you can't share knowledge and capture knowledge with a clipboard anymore. It just doesn't work. So if you're thinking about like people in construction, I said this earlier, it's like they don't necessarily have in the field access to a lot of these things. And if they're on a mobile device, they may not even have a cell phone signal to kind of report back on something. Now again, most of your tablets and phones these days have some kind of recording capability that even if I record and I'm not on a cell signal or something like that, I can still record. So we need to design more of our knowledge capture for what I call mobile first, because it's low friction, right? I don't want my people out in the field. I don't want anybody to have to like, okay, what did you do today out there in the field? Imagine this gentleman here, right? He's out there in a mining operation, and I'm going to ask him, hey, I want you to come back into the corporate offices, let's say next week at, let's say at noon. I'm going to have you sit at a computer for 2 or 3 hours, and I want you to document what you did. I guarantee you he's looking at it going, why am I doing this? But imagine if I gave him some, a mobile device out in the field, and I said, I'm gonna give you some training how to record something. All you have to do is record it. You put, there's basically a checklist. Here's a form. You go through this. You record something. You tell me what you're seeing, and we'll put it in the system. And then let the system help us at corporate to analyze that and see where the problem is. So a lot of companies are starting to do this, as I said. So what we need is we need real tools for field teams. If we're not doing this, we should be doing video SOPs. I don't, again, manuals, SOPs and manuals, don't need them. What you need is a way of capturing these steps. Let's say it's a valve rotation, pump overhauls, whatever, record it and have someone else there record it one time. That's all you need. And if it takes an hour to record that, and that's fine. It's a little bit of extra money because you took someone off of this job over here to record that valve adjustment. Honestly, the payback is so huge, right? And again, what you can do is you can put these out there on the different devices. We used to do this. In fact, there's lots of airlines that do this today. So now airlines now have a lot of Wi-Fi and stuff like that. But back in the day, this is not too long ago. Is you used to have the manuals and stuff like that. Keep on coming back to the big manuals, which they were, right? But then they would load the tablets up. They loaded tablets up, and you would just in fact, this happened with Delta. Delta Airlines was one of the first ones to do this. Is when you would every month they would get a new tablet on the plane, and that was for training. So any new updates to the system, the captains and the navigator and stuff like that could actually go through the training as they were in the air. So this is going to be an update that's going to happen next month. All of our airlines are going to, or all of our planes are going to roll out with this. They could do the training. They could look up things, and they said, "Well, I need the references." So all of those were on the tablet, and so it was one of those things that they could then they would drop them off. Every airport had a station where they could actually plug them in, get the updates, and then they'd send them back out again. The easy one, which is I see this a lot now, and I was just at a print facility, not an Amazon print facility, but recently at a big print facility, and they had QR codes on their equipment. And I was asking about it. I said, "Well, can I scan that QR code?" And they said, "Yeah, you can scan that QR code." And it was so funny because it was just this big, huge printing press, and it popped open a video on Vimeo, and it was how to put ink on the rollers and a few other things, right? That if you had to do it manually, now it's mostly automated, but if you had to do something manually, I said, "Wasn't this proprietary information?" They said, "Who cares? It's like no one is gonna like steal this off of Vimeo and like go try to do this on this huge printer." And so it was funny that they did that. But again, you can put them behind firewalls. That's fine. But the QR code is so easy today, right? It's literally like put it on there. You need training on it, scan that QR code. You want to get certified on it? Again, I've seen this in other places too. In fact, we have this in some have this in some of our warehouses. You want to get certified on it? It's a different QR code. You scan it with your phone. You go through a few steps. You record yourself. You can record yourself. So you hold up your phone and you say, "I'm going to do this." You hold it. You're doing whatever it is, packaging or something like that. So you can get certified by videotaping yourself. Send it in. And we used to do this where someone would manually check it. They'd watch the video, make sure it was good. Now we have AI helping with some of that stuff. So these are again the kinds of things that if we embed them into our workflow, we can do this. It's just again, it's there are tools out there that we can use. Some of them are just some of them are easier than others, right? But if you want to report them back, you may need to work with your IT department to say, how do we integrate with our systems and stuff like that. But it's too important not to these days. So let's look at a couple other ones here. So HAB, which is a grocery chain in Mexico, they do, again, you'll notice here, it's like a lot of the video stuff, a lot of this knowledge is stored locally and shared peer-to-peer. They just do a lot of things that, again, it's the retention though. Here's the interesting thing. When they started doing this, so they use tablets. This is the interesting thing about this. They use tablets on how to restock and how to think about loss prevention and stuff like that. And then what they call customer hacks. And so customers would come in and say, "Oh, and all heard this story, right? Is I'm looking at the shelf right here, but I know that the sales, for certain things are like down one shelf or something like that, right? And so, or they know that, what the store wants you to buy is on the end cap. And so they would like avoid that, like, "Oh, I don't need that stuff. I'm going to go over here where I think the sales are going to be or a cheaper product and stuff like that." So it's so interesting that they would, but again, they would just give these tablets to the frontline staff, and it would show them a diagram of how to stock the shelves. It showed them some of the hacks that customers are doing. So it's like, oh, if customers want this, we're going to put more of them up there. So all these kinds of things, and then they do what they call leaderboards. So they have leaderboards, and if you're at the top of the leaderboard, you've given feedback, you've helped a peer, you've helped helped kind of train people, you get a bonus. And so there you can see it here. It's like their retention improved 18% just by using the peer-led knowledge sharing. So, which again, I think it's easy to do. We just don't do enough of it. So there are some things that I think in a lot of your industries that plug and play, for example, right? So you need things like mobile tools that directly that can plug directly into your CMMS systems as part of your workflow. You have the if you want to do like field capture logs, they feed into your asset management systems. You have the ISO compliances, all those things now. There's usually mobile apps that plug into those larger systems, again, that live at corporate. And so we have a lot of those kinds of solutions. It's really just making sure that we implement them, that we're training our field operators to do these things, and help them through it. Because that's the other part of it, is a lot of people, now, and again, we're starting to kind of get over that hump of we would have people that would resist. And so, people resist, like, I don't want to do that. I've been here a long time. I know how to do it. But slowly we're getting people to use devices more, right? Whether it's a tablet or a mobile phone, how to do these checklists and forms on their mobile devices. So we're getting over the kind of the fear the technology is going to take your job, but also it's like, how do I work this thing? And so those modern solutions really take that raw data from the field, get put into a system, and that helps us understand, again, how we do our jobs, and or how they do their jobs, and how we can be more efficient at it. So here, as we kind of finish up here, the thing that, oops, I skipped one slide. So there we go. So solving for downtime. So we can do this if we implement these different systems, right? So if you use the real stories, do root cause analysis and stuff like that, you can stop your firefighting. You don't have to do those things. If you capture those safety critical knowledge and you share it, you protect your whole workforce. You can measure the knowledge of these things, and you can create KPIs from them. Then you leverage the AI. So you can, that's the thing. You don't have to be an AI expert. You just have to go and, again, most organizations now, big corporations, right, have someone that's AI experts. We have to ask them to leverage this so that we can see where those patterns are, and then we can adjust for those as we're out in the field. Imagine that if you said, hey, this worker who's working on piping or something like that, got a whole crew working on piping over the last year. They've given some feedback on this. They've done some video work on this. They say this valve always gets stuck open or something like that. And you take all that data, feed it in. Now you know where those patterns are. Now we can correct for those things. Is it a possibility that we need a different vendor for some of these things? Maybe. Does it mean that we might need some training? But again, those are things that we haven't had the luxury of having in the past. We have the capability to do some of that now. The last thing I would say is that is culture eats AI for breakfast. So again, if you have people that are like, AI is going to take my job, you need to make sure that they understand that AI is not going to take everybody's job. We have to work with the technology, but if they don't feel safe in sharing, then they're not going to share. If leaders don't go out in the field and model what we're asking the workforce to do, they won't share. So they should be able to say, I don't know, and we should be able to say, well, here's how we can help you. We need to celebrate the people that understand the roles that they're in and help them and elevate them. It doesn't matter where they're at, where they work. If they're really good at it, we need to really mine that knowledge a little bit more. And then the last thing I'll say is we need to really make knowledge sharing a KPI. I really believe this, and we do this in certain parts of Amazon. Is in fact, you guys, Atlassian, who's based out of Australia, they do this too. It's like share your or if you celebrate and you reward people for sharing, that becomes a success metric. Those incentives should be there, whether it's a gift card, whether it's a recognition at a town hall or something like that. All those things can be are things that people love. And so again, I just think that we can do so much more for our people if we're really taking advantage of that. And here's what I think. Our future, no matter what industry you're in, depends on what we can keep inside. I can't keep everybody in their job, but I can keep as much knowledge if I apply these things. I can start small, I can pilot things, and I can say, hey, you know what? We're going to pilot and we're just going to do it on our phones. We're going to videotape some things. We're going to put them out there on a drive somewhere. You know, everybody has access, teach them how to do it. Maybe start that way, right? And so if you capture it today, it becomes someone's solution tomorrow. So with that, I will end there for the presentation, and we can take some Q&A if you want.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren, so much. I've got a few questions in the chat and also a few sent directly to me as well. Before we
Okay.
go there, does anybody have any questions that they'd just like to ask now? Just unmute yourself and fire away. Okay. Darren, a comment which would definitely require some commentary by you. From Richard, use of mobile devices in the workplace is often regulated for reasons
Hmm.
like safety, privacy, IP protection, stuff like that. And we all know
Right.
that everybody has one in their pocket, but the use issues do need to be provisioned for. What are your comments on that?
So say the last part again.
Okay.
We all know that everyone has access to mobiles, but the
Mhm.
use issues need to be provisioned for.
Yeah. So
Maybe Richard, you'd like to elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Now we've been through an exercise fairly recently in the last couple of years where, squares have been painted in on walkways in factories. That this is an area where you can stand and use your mobile phone. We've also had, people, not always young people, older people as well, who are workers in factories saying, "Oh, can't you just put SAP on a mobile device and so we can have it at the workface rather than having to go back to the office and look stuff up and all of that." It's all
yeah.
very well, but then you've got potentially dropping, damaging, cost, whatever, and also using it when the forklift's coming or whatever. So
Sure.
there's safety
Sure.
issues. There's also, and you did mention, who cares if somebody sees your intellectual property? I think that's still a valid thing these days,
Yeah.
perhaps from older people in the
Yeah.
workforce who've grown up in that sort of environment. So
Hmm.
yeah, you do need to. I'd be interested in your comments about comments like or remarks like that.
So we have. So I'll give you an example. So in most of our warehouses, you are not allowed to use your phone on the floor.
Mm.
And so yeah, we'll ask them to put them in lockers when they come on the floor. Now we have mobile devices within the warehouses. Now
Yep.
what we don't do is we don't set them on a desk and where forklifts are coming by. Some of them are literally attached to a machine, and so they're attached to a machine. They're plugged in. You can go up there and you can do that. Now a manager might have a tablet that they walk around with, and if they're training someone, so they can again pull up a QR code or something like that.
Mm.
So in that case, there are some, again, depending on your organization, depending on how regulated you are. So for example, on my phone, there's a few apps that I use in Amazon. I have to download a app that allows Amazon to be able to wipe the things off on my phone that is theirs. And so I can access my email, I can access part of our internet and stuff like that. But it's something I have to then agree to and download it on my phone. So I can take this and I can move it, move around and do those things. So that's one thing, but again, not everybody, can do that. But again, that's where I think it's depending on how big the company is, depending on your what your organization is trying to accomplish, those kinds of things where if you want to use this, great, there's provisions to doing that, and again, there's some legal things that you need to make sure they understand. But if it's in, let's say, a factory floor or something like that, but we also have people out in the field, and we honestly, devices now are cheap. Android phones, I can pick up an Android phone for $60, and they've got plenty of bandwidth and stuff like that. So we'll do that sort of thing, and there's lots of companies that do that. You don't have to have them have their device, right? People love their device, but I guarantee you that which I do too. It's like, I'm looking at Amazon for about 5 minutes. Now I'm looking at cat videos for another 10 minutes, right? So again, it's one of those things where, again, depending on the role and stuff like that. But honestly, like I said, in this print manufacturing place that I was at recently, they bought, I think they said they bought 50 Android tablets and had them all provisioned with the different things and stuff like that. And it was less than like $5,000 to do everything. For that.
It's
and
cheap,
this is great big print company. Yeah. And those can connect to the systems and stuff like that. So they made sure they can, but again, they don't have to have a whole lot of RAM on them. You don't have to buy a whole computer system for them. So yeah, I've seen lots of different ways of doing that. I think where you get into some bigger challenges is when you get into like finance and healthcare industries. That's where you get into even more regulations. It's harder to even do your own device. You usually have to then get onto a device that they provision for you. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Darren, just picking off the back of Richard's comments, there's also a comment by Mohammed as well, also just on AI and the cost of it. And then I've got a direct message also, which I think ties it up nicely, saying, Darren, many of the people on the masterclass are dealing with tight budgets and also skeptical senior leadership, or leadership who are that far away from the plant or the facility that they don't really understand the magnitude of the knowledge that's leaving. When you're trying to sell a knowledge retention program to execs who see it as a nice to have rather than a must have, what advice, or what could be your most compelling business case argument, or another way of looking at it, what would be the smallest pilot project you could recommend to prove ROI?
Yep. Yeah. So you're going exactly where I would go with this, which is I would do a pilot program. Here's what I always say is you have to tell a good story to executives, and it has to be backed up with data. So a lot of executives, they look at just the data and they're like, oh, here's the data, right? And so money talks. And so when I say, hey, the example I used of Carl, right? I actually use that as a story. I use that as a story with one of my executives. I'm like, here's what happened. Here's this person. And, they left and blah, this happened and all that. And they just kind of sat there. I said, but here's the interesting thing. We've got 200 Carls leaving next year, and the cost is X amount, $300,000, right? And then by the way, it costs half their salary to replace it. So I start adding on the data, right? So I tell the story. They're not impressed by the data. But then all of a sudden I put the data next to a picture of Carl, and they're like going, oh, that person's important. And so sometimes that's what I need. Other times I say, well, let me run this in one region. And so what I'll ask them to do is we do this all the time, is we write a document that we call a PR FAQ, which is a press release and then frequently asked questions. It's only about a 3-page document. And so if I come up with something, or I coach, I coach a lot of directors and executives on this, is if you have an idea, pitch it as a press release. So a press release just means, this is what we're going to get out of it. Here's why we think it's going to be successful. Here's the cost to do a pilot. And so again, you'll do it in a region, and so executives will like that because it's controlled. Number one, it's controlled. You've given me the cost, whatever the amount is, and then at the end of it, we've got a yes or no answer on whether or not we're going to move forward. And so I do myself and other people that I work with on a strategy. We do a lot of pilots around these things. But again, as I say, is if you tell the story backed up with the facts and data, that tends to really kind of move people in directions that you haven't seen before. Because again, executives see data all the time. They see spreadsheets, they see visualizations all the time. If you can put a customer in there, for example, or you can put a coworker in there, you say, and again, at first, a lot of executives are like, yeah, whatever. But as soon as you put a cost to that of losing customers or losing people, and you put a cost to that, all of a sudden those people become more important to them. And so it's not about systems or anything like that. It's about, again, it's about improving process. And so those are the few things that I do that have been pretty successful when I do that. Yeah.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. Jessica's got a great question around advice or experience you may have on how to capture, record, and access information on processes and ensuring for large organizations that there isn't double handling being developed that don't align.
So so Jessica, when you say double handling, I'm trying to understand what you mean by that. So if you're going to record information, so Amazon has this problem, if I'm understanding this correctly, and happy to have you come off mute, Jessica, or put in a little bit more clarification. So we have lots of roles that that will across, take customer service, for example. We've got lots of different departments that handle customer service, right? So it's not just Amazon.com. We got Whole Foods as a store. We now have some pharmaceutical companies that we own one, and then we work with others. And so there could be duplication. And so one of the things that we try to do is we try to work with people that have similar roles. It doesn't always work though, but there is some duplication that happens. We try to minimize that as best as possible, but you can do that by, like I said, we really try to mine information from other parts of the organization before we start moving in too far into a project. But if you're talking about how do you capture and record and access information on, I mean, you can do it as simple as, like I said, right now there's some people I say, just experiment with your phones for now. If things are working, you put it in the system. And again, it doesn't cost very much to kind of, buy some phones. I tested this with a couple of pilot programs. So we were using so Ring. You guys probably know the Ring doorbell and stuff. We have cameras and stuff like that. I got the Ring team to donate about 150 cameras to really experiment with some things in a warehouse. We were looking at safety things, and I said, and actually they were prototypes. So we got 150 of these devices. We put them up in warehouses so we could look at safety. We told everybody we're doing this, and plugged them into our system. We were actually every camera had an email, so it was an Amazon email, but technically we had to pay for monthly on it, but got reimbursed through the system and all that. But basically it was hacking the system to see where some of our safety and security problems were. And we didn't have any budget for it. It was just literally like prototype cameras that they all looked weird and different, but they all worked fine. And we actually got a lot of data out of that because again, it cost us really very, very little to do that. And that's Amazon. We could afford to buy cameras and stuff, put them up, but we were getting scrappy with it. So I don't know if that hopefully answers your question. Maybe if there's something else, I didn't understand the double handling part of it though.
Yeah, hi, just checking, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Sorry, I have a new laptop and the camera's not working, so I'm glad the microphone is. So I work for a large government organization, and our sort of sub-department consists, I suppose, of 5 sister departments. And I suppose if you were to go to my role and then the equivalent of my role with that sister department, and then try and extract that information on our role and the vital, I suppose, information and process steps to try and capture, I suppose, to ensure the success of the business should that person no longer be available for work.
Yep.
I suppose if you were to do that with the department and the role that I sit within versus the sister department, unfortunately, because the business, I suppose, has developed with a lack of consistency in some regard. So I suppose just ensuring that that information that is captured and recorded and then I suppose accessible across the department as a whole is not potentially double handling in the sense of to do that accurately. Now, you would need to do that for the 5 sister departments to make sure that you're capturing relevant process information for those 5 local processes, I suppose, versus having, I suppose, a one-stop shop extracting that information and making it available for the department as a whole that then sets the standard moving forward, I suppose, so that there's no double handling.
So yeah, I mean, we have this very similar issue, Jessica, in Amazon, because we have roles that, if you look at our HR systems, like here's this role, let's say it's a program manager, but program manager means so many different things, right, in Amazon. And so what does that mean for, in your case, let's say 5 different departments? And so here's what I believe is that so number one, your tasks and the skills to do those tasks might actually be different in those 5 departments. It might actually be that there are slightly different ways of doing that job because of the department you're in, because of whatever it happens to be, right? And I deal with this all the time. So I actually think that what we're going to see is that job descriptions become more dynamic, and it probably won't. I don't think eventually it'll be kind of more roles based. It'll be more task based. So if there's tasks that are very similar, those are the ones that you want to tag and say these are good for these roles in these different departments. If there's another task, you might say then this task is different because of the role that we play over here. So I think that there can be things that are caveats within documentation. It's a little bit harder in videos, but you can do it now where you can tag chapters in videos, and so you can break videos down into chapters. You can say these chapters are for this role in this department, and then these other chapters are for this role in this department, and yet they still have very similar things. So what I try to do when I talk to people about this is number one is, again, skills could be slightly different, and I think that they're going to be more task based and then role based in the future, because roles are going to become more fluid. We're going to have to be able to do different things, not as much deep expertise in some things. And then, like I said, it's like, so being able to aggregate those tasks though based on your role. That's where a intelligent system is going to be able to do more for that. That's where the AI comes in. Right now, you can tag those things and put those in, like I said, in videos or in documents in your internet. But eventually, that will be based on what you do on a daily basis. What are the tasks you do? What are the skills that you have? And you'll actually be able to in the what I call the flow of work, you'll be able to pull up documents or videos that are based on that. And like I said, sometimes there'll be a caveat and say, this doesn't apply within here, but applies over here. Maybe there's a regulation in finance versus this finance. So, our systems are getting, where these systems are evolving so much that you're going to be able to see this in tagging in videos, and again, be able to expose those in new ways. But what it's going to take is going to take a little bit of discipline that a lot of organizations don't have yet, in that you have to tag them with metadata in order to surface those in the right way. And so this is why we need subject matter experts to do the videos, like you, Jessica, and then someone else in the other department say, well, it's slightly different for us. Well, okay, then maybe this chapter in the videos for you guys, and we'll record a different one for you over here that's slightly different. So I still think that those things will happen, but again, we'll be able to segregate those much better than we have in the past with new systems today.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Darren, there's a related question from Alex around, just acknowledging that we're all overwhelmed by unstructured data. All of us acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Advice around capturing tacit knowledge in an accessible form like video, while still being able to actually structure and tag that data so it's accessible or easy
The
to
funny
find.
thing is, so if you ever, so some of you probably watch YouTube videos or Instagram or TikTok and stuff. Although TikTok's shorter videos, but if you watch YouTube, you'll notice that some of these videos are so I call them, well, that's what they're called. They're called chapters, right? So there's maybe it's someone talking about Well, we'll take a, working on a device or something like that. And so it's like how to open a laptop, or how to, put in more RAM, or maybe it's, how to change a tire or something like that. And then this one's about, washing the windshield on a car. So those used to be done manually. And so you'd have to actually say, okay, from minute 1 to minute 5, this is this, and you actually have to do that. The good news is, especially with video today, is there's lots of video editing apps that actually do that for you, and it's based on a transcription. So if you, again, there's even free, like I use at home. I use this thing called, or an app called DaVinci Resolve. It's a video app to do editing, and it outputs a transcription for me of that. And that, based on that, and again, so there's also another one called CapCut that I actually have on my phone, that actually takes what I record, and it cuts it into chapters and tags things for me. And so if you're thinking about, like, for example, in the workplace, imagine that you're working on a manufacturing floor and they say, well, this machine is going to cut this widget, and then it's going to be pushed down to this one, and you're video recording it. You can actually then say, you can actually tell the app to say, to cut when there's a different thing happening. And so the AI will look at that in the video editing, and it will actually tag those things for you. And so it's become so much easier than it used to be. You used to have to actually manually tag these things. Same thing's happening with documents. So if you think about all the documents too that are out there, I mean, look at, Amazon has thousands of documents over the course of 20 years that we've been in business. I couldn't find stuff 2 years ago on the wiki. I can find stuff that was 10 years old now, based on based on the AI just reading through every document that, it doesn't read through every single document, but it reads the first part of the document and says these documents might apply to you. It's doing the same thing with videos and stuff now. So yeah, it's getting so much easier to do all of this stuff with AI. And again, you don't have to be an AI expert. Like I said, I'm doing it, on my phone at home. I'm helping people at work do some of these things. But yeah, it's again, you don't need an editor. You don't have to like tag everything. There's still a little bit of a discipline when you're creating documents in. You still want to put them in the right places too, though. That, for example, don't keep them on your laptop. Put them somewhere, right? It's amazing how many people say, "Oh, I lost my laptop and I lost all my stuff." I'm like, you shouldn't have lost anything off your laptop, because at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, everything should be on somewhere, on your internet, on a drive or something somewhere. Yeah.
Darren, we've literally got a couple of minutes left, but I don't want to lose this question because it's a non-technical, non-AI one. It's about human psychology. How do you,
I love these.
you'll need a quick answer. How do you get a 30-year veteran who's protective of their expertise and their experience, maybe even their job security, to actually open up and share what they know with younger team members?
Well, first I get them a scotch, and I sit down and talk to them after hours. True story, right? It's like, hey, you want to go to coffee? You want to get a scotch after hours? And that's one thing I do. But the other thing is, like, you know what? Here's the thing. It's all about, because this 30-year veteran, it's all about ego. And honestly, it's like, I want their knowledge. It's like, hey, you got so much to share. Would you be willing to share that with a couple people? Because we really need your information. You're the expert. As soon as you stroke their ego a little bit, they're like going, oh yeah, I'll do that. They protect it because they don't get recognized a lot of times. They know they know that they're the ones that know how to do it. And people are like, yeah, that's Bob over there. Don't worry about him. He's going to get his stuff. But if I go over there and I say, hey, Bob, what's going on? I hear you're the expert in this. Can you just tell me something about it? As soon as you say something like that, like, just tell me something about this. I don't know about that. Amazing how much they'll open up and share. It's just, and again, everybody's slightly different. But again, that's a psychological thing. Is some people like the recognition publicly. Some people don't want to be recognized publicly and say, just share it with me or share it with this person. It's amazing how much you can get out of people when you just go and talk to them. Just go and talk to them and say, I admire you. I want to know more. And if you say it, it's amazing to me, like, how many people just like open up. And if that doesn't work, then alcohol for sure. So.
Darren, wonderful to have you with us. Again, thank you for sharing your expertise and your experience, and being so generous with your commentary and your willingness to answer questions and that as well. It's amazing. Always a good session with you. Guys, thanks for joining the class on behalf of everybody. Thanks to Darren for joining us. I put 3 resources for you guys in the chat there as well. There's a skills and capability report that we authored earlier this year, which talks about the maintenance workforce of the future and losing institutional knowledge and a whole lot of other stuff as well. I've put a link there to training courses coming up in Newcastle, Brizzy, Melbourne, and Perth in the next couple of months. And then also Darren's session here and all the other masterclasses that we've run over the last 3 years are all stored on our mainstream community network with a whole lot of other content. There's thousands of pieces of content on there. It's free to join. For those of you who are not members, you can. It's like a LinkedIn for maintenance and reliability people. The link is in there. Jump in, have a look. Be nice to have you a part of that. But once again, Darren, thanks so much.
Of course, happy to do it.
Have a good evening
See you,
over there, and see you all soon.
Sounds good. Bye now.
Thank you.